Ladies and gentlemen, thanks guys for joining me for today's video. In it, I want to look at the big deal between the Washington Commanders and the Indianapolis Colts, where Carson Wentz was dealt once again. Before we get to that, if you guys are new to the channel, if you haven't done it yet, please consider giving me a like and subscribe. Your support means so very much. It helps me out a ton. I cannot thank you enough. To all my current subscribers out there, I really appreciate you guys as well. With that done, let's get into this version of Hot Off the Press. Similar to the Russell Wilson video, I wanted to look at who won this deal, if we can figure that out right off of the bat, and also what does it mean for both the Colts and the Commanders. We're gonna start with the trade as a whole and what it looked like. So the Washington Commanders received Carson Wentz and a 2022 second round pick. For the Colts, they get a 2022 second and a third, and also a 2023 third round pick, which can actually move up to a second if Carson Wentz plays 70% of the snaps in 2022. It's kind of a funny irony considering that same type of deal was linked when he went to Indianapolis. We'll first dive into the Colts side of things, look at the trade, and then talk about where they go from here, what it means for them. So ultimately, this is about the Indianapolis Colts deciding that they were going to move on from a mistake that they made last year. They were able to do that and actually get a pretty excellent haul for it. The Carson Wentz experiment was clearly a failure, and I think that some people probably knew that before as it happened, but it is very clear now, and it cost the Colts this year's first round pick. But in getting at least 2/3 from this deal and maybe a second and a third back for Carson Wentz, they mitigated the damage as best they could while being able to actually move up in this year's draft as a bonus in doing so. As a Colts fan, I'm not really sure you could ask for more. What are the next steps here for Indianapolis? Well, the Colts are now in need of a quarterback in the worst possible way, as they have no clear successor on the roster. They are probably not going to be able to draft one either, because their first pick this year comes in at number 43 overall. So the veteran market is probably going to be their best option. The short list would include Jimmy Garoppolo, Mitch Trubisky, Teddy Bridgewater, and Daniel Jones. We talked about Baker Mayfield in the Seahawks video as well. He is a potential candidate depending on what happens in Cleveland. When we consider the excellent defense in Indianapolis and an all-world talent at running back, they also have a pretty good wide receiver over there as well. Someone like Teddy Bridgewater would probably make the most sense, as he limits the turnovers, at least most of the time, and he showed some success in a very similar system in Denver. I wouldn't say that the Colts are in a win now mode, but they definitely have a roster that's built to take advantage of right now. So this is a questionable move, if only because there is no obvious fill-in with Wentz out of there. But they clearly felt that he wasn't the answer, and I really applaud them for moving on when they could instead of doubling down on a sinking ship. With the Titans really the only team in that division to worry about, and that's assuming that the Colts find a serviceable replacement, they're going to be just fine for the 2022 season. They can rely heavily, just as they did last year, on Jonathan Taylor, and that stellar defense is going to carry the load until they can find a long-term option at QB. They give themselves flexibility in the future with the picks that they acquired as well. Most importantly, they get out of the Carson Wentz debacle, and they do not even have to pay him to do so. So for me, I give the Colts a B+ on this trade. It would definitely have been higher, but I cannot overlook the fact that this team ultimately gave up a first last year to trade away a player this year that they're now getting a pair of thirds for at worst. They currently have no succession plan in place, so that hurts them as well. But in a vacuum, this move was fantastic. Let's now move to the far uglier side, in my opinion, on this trade, and that is in Washington. So the Commanders, first and foremost, inquired about Jimmy Garoppolo and Russell Wilson before ultimately making this deal with the Colts. So they were a shopping. Washington is going to take on the rest of Carson Wentz's contract. That includes a $28 million amount this year, and that is a $5 million roster bonus as well, and that is due in the middle of March. They also moved down a little bit in the second round this year to get Wentz on the roster, presumably bringing some stability to the position. What are the next steps now for Washington? Wentz inherits, I would say, a downgraded offensive line for sure from what he had in Indianapolis, with some playmakers that are comparable, although nobody is Jonathan Taylor. While Washington's defense certainly struggled early on, they picked it up late, and they're probably just a slight downgrade from what Indianapolis currently has right now. My biggest question, though, is why? Behind a stellar offensive line, supported by an excellent defense, and with the ability to hand the ball to one of the best running backs that we've seen in the last 5 years, and easily the best running back last year in Jonathan Taylor, Wentz was unable to get the Colts to the playoffs, and he was, at best, unimpressive. He made far too many mistakes, many of them in key situations, and he could not finish the job towards the end of the season, losing 2 straight to fall out of that playoff hunt when it mattered. So I honestly do not believe he is much of an upgrade over Taylor Heinicke, and Heinicke really just flashed at times. He never really was consistent in the production on the field for Washington. But even if he is an upgrade from Taylor Heinicke, which I think is debatable, that difference in ability does not make up for the exorbitant gap in pay and impact on the salary cap for Washington. If 2 franchises were okay getting rid of Carson Wentz in back-to-back seasons, should that not tell you something, Washington? Is that not a red flag for you at all? I just do not see how this move upgrades much for the Commanders, and I feel that they're going to be basically right around where they were last year. They might win 1, 2 more games than they did, but it certainly is not a move that's going to change or move the needle for me. And it seems like an expensive stopgap more than a true franchise find. I give the Commanders a D- for this trade, as they did not acquire a quarterback that's worthy of his contract, nor one that's going to turn the tides for this team. They gave up far more capital than they should have, and they also took on a bloated salary to boot. The Colts, they're the winners of this trade. They get the declining asset, both physically and financially, out of there, and they're able to do so while also getting some solid draft capital in return. As far as where the teams go from here, so I think the Carson Wentz trade puts the Colts squarely in the veteran market with a chance to keep that team in the playoff picture. And for the Commanders, I think that they are still on the outside, looking in for a playoff spot next season. They've dumped resources for a false sense of security at the quarterback position as well. It is not a good look. And that'll do it for the video today. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. I hope you learned something. If you are new to the channel, or if you haven't done it yet, please consider giving me a like and subscribe. Your support means the world to me. It helps me out so very much. This is Relentless Press. I'm your host, Abraham Opatz, and we'll see you next time.